So I hope everyone's doing really well today, and I wanted to do this video just kind of going over a couple of things I've learned this week. And something I'm really fascinated by is I've always been interested in when people are completely in a terrible situation, or they've gone through a horrendous past, or they've been broke, or in terms of financially, and they've still managed to come up the success ladder, so to speak, and managed to still continue to be extremely successful. I've always been fascinated. What is that psychological difference in people who manage to become so successful? Them hidden elements that we can't visually see, but we recognize in people and stuff like that. And also, I've been fascinated by why is it so that when people are suffering from depression, and they do suffer from maybe mild, not maybe clinically depressed people, but maybe mild forms of it, where they go in cycles with it, or the most interesting thing to me is when people are depressed for a number of years, who have actually been taking antidepressants in high quantities, are still depressed. And why is that? You would have thought that would cure it or combat it, and oftentimes I think we forget that even if we do change our biochemistry, that manipulate the deficiencies in our neurotransmitters and stuff like that. You might have heard that most people with depression suffer from deficiency in serotonin and stuff like that, and that is true. But why is it so many people who can sustain large quantities of antidepressants so long are still depressed? And oftentimes they're manipulating the biochemistry, but they're not actually making the psychological shifts what actually enable them to get out of depressive states. They haven't learned the fundamentals of their own natures and stuff like that, the trigger points, so to speak, and the actual things which probably if they knew about them they wouldn't get into a depressive state. Oftentimes we think that we can just solve things with a potion or a pill, and oftentimes we have to make them humongous, sometimes not humongous, they don't have to be a quantum leap in consciousness and stuff like that, but we have to make them small changes psychologically, so physically we can endure the hard points, the sticking points and stuff like that. So I've just kind of been wondering about that this week, and I've also been wondering about, I think probably because I've been back at university and stuff, that some of the science behind maybe some of the stuff I've been saying, because I think we all intuitively know when we hear some kind of metaphor or quotation or story, we can usually derive quite naturally the moral principle or lesson quite easily. However, I think probably from being at university and surrounded by scientists, it puts you in a different frame of mind, that you try and adopt more logical patterns of thinking. So I've tried to really consciously make a lot of effort this week to try and find some of the studies and some of the scientific terminology behind some of the stuff I've been saying. And interestingly, like I've said about why is it some people who take antidepressants are still depressed for such a number of years, because they haven't made that psychological shift. And interestingly, when I've been looking at this, I've always kind of wondered, is it just me, or do we have to be nicer as people to people who are depressed, or is it because they're really just extremely hard done to and we should really empathize with that, or is it up to that person to make the shifts in themselves? Do they need to keep taking more drugs, or up their dose, or is it because they need to make some psychological shift? So my point being, is it a learnable skill, optimism, or is it something that only the blessed or the chosen few have? Interesting, when I've been looking at this week, I found a term called learnt optimism, and it's usually defined as a person's ability to cultivate positive psychology within themselves, and it's usually by combating on a conscious level their negative self-talk. So they're actually re-establishing and reinforcing on a habitual level every single day, to try and combat that negative self-talk we all have sometimes, and to try and reinforce it with more positive affirmations, positive imagery, and positive thoughts. So I thought that was quite interesting. And the other thing I've been interested in was usually the trigger point for most people is stress. So I've been always quite fascinated with when people, some people manage to handle stress phenomenally well. I'm sure we all know people who have like 4 kids and they're working 2 jobs and they're still happy as anything, because they've changed their response to stress and their outlook and perception of it. And I was looking at a seminar yesterday, and I can't remember the title of it. I think it was Positive Emotions Under or in the Midst of Stress. And this doctor had actually found some really interesting findings amongst a whole body of data. And some of the techniques I'm going to mention are quite interesting, but something which I thought was even more, something I found was even more interesting was their definition of stress. Now, we all kind of know, I think intuitively, that stress is, it's something associated with tremendous amount of psychological tension, or pressure or something of that nature. I think in the dictionary it's something similar to that. But from a kind of psychology standpoint, I thought this was quite interesting. And she said that, I was going to read this off my Mac. Stress is the perception that something in the environment taxes or exceeds your resources for coping and endangers your well-being. And I thought the interesting word in that definition was perception. It's the perception of something in the environment what taxes or exceeds your resources for coping. And it's quite interesting when you look at it that way. And you probably know two people, they both see stress in a different way, and that's because it is a perceptual thing. You define how you see stress, just as you define how you see everything else. It is a perceptual thing. It's kind of like the phrase, change the way things, change the way you see things, and they'll change the way they appear back at you, so to speak. Interestingly, when they had gone through this body of data, I'm not going to go through the exact, 4 or 5 different studies, but the common denominators of one technique I thought was kind of quite interesting, which I've kind of known intuitively to do. I just didn't know the right terminology to try and explain it. And they found a great technique and a great coping mechanism called positive appraisal, or positive reappraisal, sorry. And this was when a person created a meaning on rephrase that again. When someone purposely created a meaning around a negative situation and actually developed their own silver lining around it. And this actually meant that in the midst of panic or stress or chaos or whatever, that they managed to derive, despite the chaos, they managed to derive a more positive lesson from it, and so they didn't go away empty-handed. They saw something from it they could gain value from, something which actually reminded themselves that things could have been a hell of a lot worse, and actually came out quite lucky really from it. They changed how they saw the situation, and that by actually just creating that positive thought around a negative situation actually changed their emotional response to it. I thought that was quite interesting. And another thing, I'm just kind of reading this off my Mac. And then what they had also found as well as their emotional response had changed, their actual physical health had actually changed as well. It increased mortality, happiness, optimism. Another thing they found actually was the study was one of the most stressful kind of things you could possibly imagine. It was a carer looking after someone they had loved, or two people in a relationship. They were looking at a person with HIV and how they handled looking after them, going through the death of their own partner, and then actually how they actually carried out how they lived after it. And I think they had said caring for them was extremely stressful as well and stuff like that. But interestingly, what they found was a certain coherence with they had found not necessarily coherence, but occurrence, of that they had positive emotions as well as negative emotions, and in the happier stages there was still negative emotions, and in the negative emotions there was still positive emotions as well. It wasn't kind of one sacrificing the other, and I thought that was quite interesting because it just goes to show that even people who in a happy state, it's not because they don't feel negative emotions, it's because the positive emotions are outweighing their negative. So it's not the opposite of it. And I've often said in a lot of videos that happiness isn't the absence of problem, it's just your ability to handle them. And that actually just kind of reinforces that when someone is happy, it isn't just an accident and they just feel invulnerable all the time. They feel negative emotions just as much as the positive, but their positive outweighs their negative, which I thought was very, very interesting. So So again, like just to reinforce what I've just said, you know, optimism is a learnable skill. It isn't just for the select few or naturally happy. I mean, really, in my natural state, I really recognise that I'm not really an optimistic person. Like it took me a very, very long time to get to the degree of optimism I think I have now. And you know, I really think that just by practicing, another thing they actually mentioned just before I finished the video is they actually did gratitude journals as well, and they found that was actually a significant thing. Another thing was mindfulness, being aware of your own thoughts in a non-judgmental way, that you could actually just view your thoughts almost like a projection screen and say, well, this is good, this is good, this is good. Actually, wait, that's my weak link. I need to avoid that negative thought. I need to avoid slipping myself up in this stressful situation. It's being aware and conscious of your own thoughts going through your head, the self-talk, you say to yourself, and just being conscious of it and just being aware how to edit it in a very positive way. And then again, like I said, gratitude journals, just reminding of the good in the day. A lot of people, have a majority a very good day, and one bad thing happens, and the day is a bad day. But again, it's reinforcing and reaffirming that there was good pockets of things in your day, and by doing that, it's reminding yourself that things could have been a hell of a lot worse, and you could be in a terrible situation. There is still some good in the day, and it's really digging it out. Sometimes it can be really difficult to do that, but it's not impossible. So I hope you really enjoyed that video, and I found that particularly quite interesting when I had heard it. That stress is a perceptual thing, and as long as you change the meaning you're associating with, it just makes it that much easier just to kind of override the negative emotions. Even though it is really tough, it is a discipline in itself. You have to learn to challenge your own negative self-talk. If we just if we were just to lose complete control of our own conscious thoughts, I really think that our natural tendency sometimes is to be pessimistic. I don't know if that's because we're in England, if you're watching this from England, because of the the sun and stuff like that, and it affects our serotonin and stuff. But we have to, regardless of where you're from, we have to be willing to stay more optimistic, so we can actually, reduce depressive symptoms. We can actually reduce, any kind of illness or severe health side effects and diseases and whatever. I think one of the things that she had actually said was how much of an impact stress actually has, depending how well you define it. If you define it in an extremely negative way, it has a severe effect on your health. They actually found people who were more optimistic lived longer. Their immune responses were a lot higher, they were a lot stronger. They actually found, I think it was, that if you do experience a lot of stress, that you're I can't find the word, that you're more likely, so to speak, to actually get a cold and stuff like that, and illness, and as well, and other things like increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, and it increased a lot of other tendencies, not just the mental state. So something which I thought of today was trying to get out of an oppressive state, I think that's the word, and looking at something as more of a progressive state. So you're actually using a stress that actually advance your own capabilities to a more elite level. So when you actually are in the midst of battle, that you don't get completely taken out from the first hit. You can learn to shoulder it, and it's really learning to make optimism a discipline. I think it's really being in tune with how you hear yourself think. So I hope you really enjoyed that video. Any questions, comment below, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.